Are you looking to find the least expensive windows of time to sail in Alaska in 2025, as well as the weeks you should avoid because they're crazy pricey? Then this is the video for you. Hi, I'm Tiffany from Destination for Vacation. Thanks for joining me. Alaska cruises can leave quite a dent in your wallet, although those of us who have been there are often just itching to return. Because of Alaska's popularity in its short sailing season, you can easily pay double and even triple the price as someone in your same cabin paid for a different sailing date in 2025. Who wants to pay inflated prices for the same itinerary, same cruise line, same cruise ship, and same type of cabin? Not me. I'd rather use my savings to go on 2 Alaska cruises. I've always heard that you'll save the most money sailing when the season first opens up in May or by simply waiting until the season starts to wind down in September. Some people have even sworn by the advice of always take the first or last cruise of the Alaska season to save the most money. Even if the advice is true for sailings in 2025, which we'll find out in this video, those savings may come at the expense of lousy weather and not as many opportunities to do things once you're on shore because some places just aren't open yet or have already closed up shop for the season. And some families just can't cruise in April or September because of school and work schedules. Recently, I've been getting tons of emails promising that now's the best time to book my next cruise to Alaska. Some of the prices I saw for this season got me to wondering, will I really save the most money booking during the first or last months? And is one of the 2 options substantially cheaper than the other? Does the common advice still apply even when I'm booking just 4 months out before the season starts? Or is it more applicable to advanced sales, in this case, 2026 itineraries? If the advice is true, can I still find some good deals in June, July, or August? Or should I just give up? What dates should I avoid booking in 2025? And finally, are there any trends across cruise lines or cabin types in terms of pricing? So I decided to put the advice of buying during the first and last months of a sailing to the test to see if that really was the trend across all cruise lines for the 2025 season, as I've always assumed it to be. And since I was doing that, I figured I might as well find out answers to those other questions. So I poured myself a cup of coffee and got started with my analysis. About 23 cups later, I had my results, and I'll show you what I found. Cruise line by cruise line. But first, I want to accommodate those viewers whose attention spans have been molded by 60-second TikTok videos and YouTube shorts who want me to just give you the gist of my analysis so you can move on to your next video. Here's your answer. The advice holds up somewhat for the initial sailings, but not for the last. And yes, you can find dramatic savings at other times, but it really depends on the cruise line and ship. Thanks for watching. Okay, now for those of you who are still with me and are thinking about buying an Alaska cruise for the 2025 sailing season, let's look at the specifics of the analysis so you can find the best pricing windows for the cruise line and ship you prefer sailing on. But first, if you've been wondering why you've been bombarded with emails from cruise lines and travel agents over the past couple of weeks, it's because we're in the midst of wave season, the cruise industry's equivalent of Black Friday sales. Wave season runs January through March and is advertised as the period when cruise lines offer some of their best prices of the year. So theoretically, the pricing I'm showing you in this video, which was captured on January 15th, 2025, should be among the best the cruise lines have to offer. But keep in mind that booking a cruise very early in advance or within a 90-day period from the sailing will often offer even better deals, as can casino discounts and loyalty perks. But that's all a topic for a future video. We'll stick to the pricing here so I don't give a mini dissertation. If you've watched this video on Destination for Vacations channel, you'll remember that I decided to book my recent Mexican Riviera cruise on Norwegian Joy through Vacations2Go because I saved about $600 compared to the prices of the other 2 companies I had considered. So for this video, I'm using the prices that I found online at the Vacations2Go website on January 15th as my baseline so I can compare trends. That doesn't mean that Vacations to Go will have the best price for these itineraries. It was just much easier and faster to access pricing on their website because of how it's posted. And I only wanted to use one company's pricing to rule out that any pricing differences were due to a competitor's discount instead of the date itself. While there might be slightly higher or lower pricing for a particular type of cabin, inside, Oceanview, or balcony, that's offered for sale by one company compared to another, companies are basically selling the same inventory, so the pricing trends across dates should be about the same. Here are some things to keep in mind. I excluded suites from this analysis because the types of suites vary widely across cruise lines and can artificially inflate a price. So we're only going to look at inside cabins, ocean view cabins, and balcony cabins. Each price I used was for the lowest category for that cabin type that was available to purchase on January 15th. The pricing listed in this analysis is per person, not per cabin. And for the sake of time, I didn't analyze solo cabin pricing since not all cruise lines offer it. Since you probably don't want to sit through a 2-hour-long video on the topic, I limited my pricing analysis to 7-day itineraries by the mainstream cruise lines that offer weekly sailings in Alaska: Carnival, Celebrity, Disney, Holland America, Norwegian, Princess, and Royal Caribbean. I also only included ships that have a 4.5-star or 5-star rating from those lines, which means I excluded Celebrity Edge and Celebrity Solstice from this analysis because they have a 5.5-star rating. I've also excluded the luxury lines. There are certainly pros and cons for sailing during each month in Alaska, as there are with using a particular cruise line and selecting certain cabin types, but those discussions will be saved for future videos. For now, the intent of this video is to focus on which windows of time offer the best and most expensive pricing. Know that pricing goes up and comes down according to supply and demand. So by the time you're watching this video, I'm sure a number of these prices will have changed. But the trends in pricing will likely remain the same, at least up until 90 days prior to sailing. This video only focuses on 2025 sailings. However, Destination for Vacation's next video will focus on using the same analysis, but with 2026 sailings to see if the trends we find here remain the same or if they change. That should help you save a boatload of money on your 2026 cruise if you're thinking about buying it during wave season. There are 2 different types of itineraries: round trip or one way. The 2 round trip itineraries that are offered embark from either Seattle or Vancouver. Then there are ships that sail one way, northbound or southbound, sailing between Vancouver and what is listed as Anchorage. But Anchorage doesn't have a cruise ship port. So if you're sailing on Celebrity or Royal Caribbean, your port for these kinds of sailings is Seward, which is about a 2.5-hour drive to Anchorage. If you're sailing on the other cruise lines, that port would be Whittier, which is about an hour's drive to Anchorage. Everything added up to 477 sailings for the 2025 season. The first thing I did was pull the indoor, ocean view, and balcony cabin prices for those sailings. Then I noted the 3 sailings with the lowest price and the 3 with the highest price for each cabin type on that ship. If there were additional sailings that were within $50 of the very lowest or the most expensive price, I included them because it's a pretty nominal difference. And this is what I came up with. This is the pricing information for inside cabins only for each of these cruise ships. Some cruise lines start sailing in Alaska earlier than others, so each number in these circles represents Sunday's date for the month. In other words, this circle represents the week of April 13th, and this one represents the week of September 28th. Now, take a look at Carnival Luminosa. There are no circles under the weeks of April 13th and April 20th, because she doesn't start sailing for the 2025 season until the week of April 27th. No circles means no sailings offered. Notice Luminosa's first circle is under the week of April 27th. That's because her very first sailing date of the season starts on May 1st, which falls on a Thursday within that week of April 27th. Do you see how that circle is green? That means that this is one of the 3 cheapest sailings for an inside cabin. If we wanted to purchase an inside cabin on Carnival Luminosa, we'd save the most money buying it on her first 3 sailings of the season. We just have to choose which date to leave on. May 1st, which is priced at $836 per person, May 8th, which is priced at $826 per person, or May 15th, which would cost $838 per person. The second sailing on May 8th has the cheapest price for the season, so if I were solely focused on buying the absolute cheapest cabin, that's what I'd book. But do you see how there's only a $10 per person difference in price between the first and second sailings? If I had my heart set on the first Alaska sailing for the ship, it's going to cost a total of $20 more for that cabin based on double occupancy. That's nothing. And the same holds true for the price difference between sailing on May 8th and May 15th. But should I call up my travel agent and say, give me the cheapest inside cabin you have for the July 10th sailing? We're talking a different story because that one costs $1,224 per person. So the cabin would cost $2,448 for that date, which is $772 more than if I just asked for the cheapest cabin on the May 15th sailing, which was the highest priced of the 3 cheapest cabins. So when you see red for a circle, that means that date is among the most expensive for sailing in that cabin type over the season. So you're probably going to want to avoid it. Now, earlier I said I wanted to find the 3 least expensive and the 3 most expensive dates for each ship. But notice there are 7 red circles for Luminosa, not just 3. For Luminosa, there were 4 other dates within $50 of the very highest priced sailing date. So there were really 7 sailing dates that were really up there in price. Take a look here. The difference between the July 24th sailing and the July 3rd sailing is only $47. So I consider the July 24th sailing to be among the most expensive dates to sail in an inside cabin on the Luminosa. The same method holds true for the cheaper dates. Look at Holland America, New Amsterdam. There are 7 dates that are all within $50 of each other that have the least expensive prices. So I would feel comfortable booking an inside cabin for any one of these dates because the price difference is pretty nominal. And at least for New Amsterdam, we see that the first sailing and the last sailing are among the cheapest, just like that advice that's been floating around. But that advice doesn't really hold true for Holland America Zaandam, does it? Neither her first month of sailings nor her last is the cheapest. In fact, the last date she sails happens to be among the most expensive of the season for an inside cabin. But with the exception of 3 of Holland America's ships, the first 3 sailings of the season on the other ships here will pretty much match that guidance of buying within the first month of sailing. But buying during the last month of sailing doesn't always provide the best savings either. There are only 4 ships where this is the case, and the Disney Wonder stands out as having the most consistency with that advice. There really are no trends within any of the cruise lines here in terms of the most expensive times to book across all their ships within the line. I'd stay away from the Koningsdam for the months of June and July, and the same holds true with the New Amsterdam, although that first week in June looks fine. Overall, though, we see from about June 15th through the end of July, we're much more likely to be treading into dangerous territory with our wallets. Yet there are still pockets of opportunity, like on Holland America's Noordam. Let's see if Norwegian and Princess are the same. The first few sailings on Norwegian tend to be more discounted, but they also start earlier than the other ships. The first Bliss sailing is not within $50 of the least expensive price, but she's going to be the first ship sailing in Alaska for the season out of all the ships here. Look at that, April 6th. Oof, bundle up. So, discounted fare probably isn't needed because there's plenty of demand from people who want to be there first and have the ports to themselves. I definitely don't want to be purchasing fare right now to be sailing on Norwegian Encore or Jade during mid-June or July. Grand Princess's first sailing is among the most expensive for her, but she's starting her season quite late, May 27th, and is very limited in the number of Alaska sailings she'll have this year. Inside cabins on Royal Princess tend to be less expensive at the end of the season, not at the start of the season, but she also starts a bit late compared to other Princess ships. What about Royal Caribbean? Here, we have a little bit more of a trend across the cruise line's pricing, in that the heavier discounts tend to be more at the end of their season after kids have returned to school. I would avoid booking sailings the week of June 22nd. So it was kind of a mixed bag for indoor cabin pricing, wasn't it? What about Oceanview cabins? Here, there's a little more consistency. Beginning of the season? Cheaper prices, except for the Koningsdam, which, just like her indoor cabins, is waiting until the season is almost over to heavily discount cabins. Starting around June 22nd and over the next 3 sailings, most ships will be getting into peak pricing. Now, take a look at Norwegian Bliss's first sailing. That's one of the best times to purchase an Oceanview cabin. Remember, it wasn't the cheapest for inside? Also, look at Jade. Not nearly as much red in June and July. Royal Princess has no circles because no fares were being offered as of January 15th from Vacations2Go for the Oceanview cabins. I don't know the reason why, but again, since I was trying to stick with one company for pricing for this analysis, I just worked with what I had. Discovery Princess tends to offer the best discounted rates on Oceanview cabins towards the end of her season. And with Royal Caribbean, we still see better pricing towards the end of the season. On Carnival and Celebrity, balcony cabins tend to be the least expensive for the initial 3 sailings. Disney Wonder again offers a better discount on them during the first and last sailings of the season. While the Eurodam and Westerdam offer better discounts at the start of the season, for Koningsdam and New Amsterdam, you have your choice of first or last sailing. And good things come to those who wait to sail the Zaandam and want a balcony cabin. We see similar pricing with Norwegian as was offered with their Oceanview cabins. But on Princess, you'll find more discounted rates on balcony cabins towards the end of the sailing season. But notice the shift here with balcony cabins on Royal Caribbean's Radiance of the Seas and Serenade of the Seas. You don't necessarily have to wait until the end of the season to get the best cabin rates. So why bother trying to find the least expensive price? Is there really that wide of a range in pricing between the least expensive and most expensive dates? It depends on the cruise line. Here's the range of prices for the sailing dates in the season. All the prices listed here are per person based on double occupancy. The number next to a ship's name indicates its rating. Is it a 4.5-star ship or a 5-star ship? Take a look at the column that's labeled inside. Now, go down until you see Holland America Koningsdam. If I choose the September 27th sailing, which is currently the cheapest inside cabin price for the season, it will cost me $803 per person. But if the only week I can get off work is the week of June 28th, the cheapest inside cabin I'll be able to get is $1,014 per person, which is $211 more than that September 27th sailing. In other words, I'm paying $422 more for the same inside cabin just to sail on a different date. Everything else is the same, but that doesn't burn quite as much as, say, an inside cabin on Norwegian Encore. Choose the wrong date, and you're basically going to pay twice as much for that inside cabin. If I take the April 27th sailing, I'll pay $974 per person. So, based on double occupancy, my cabin will cost $1,948. But if I take the July 13th sailing, I'll pay $1,877 per person. So that same cabin will now cost me $3,754 for an inside cabin. And it gets even better. Take a look at the range of prices for a balcony cabin on the Coral Princess, a 4.5-star ship. If I take the September 3rd sailing, that cabin will cost the two of us a total of $4,218. But if I call up my travel agent and say, give us the cheapest balcony cabin for the June 18th sailing, we'll pay $10,934. That's crazy. Sure, sailing Alaska in June versus September is a totally different experience. But do you really want to pay $6,000 more for a 7-day sailing on a 4.5-star ship? Not me. What I would do in that case is look into a balcony cabin on a different ship in Princess's fleet. That particular date was for a southbound inside passage cruise from Whittier to Vancouver. I can instead book the June 21st southbound sailing on the Sapphire Princess, which is a 5-star rated ship, and pay a total of $5,298. So about $1,000 more to sail about the same time in June and on a higher rated ship. Or I can go with a different cruise line. Or just flip my itinerary, take the northbound passage on Celebrity Summit, paying $4,272 for a balcony cabin. And those prices I just quoted you, none of them are among each ship's cheapest balcony sailing dates. So I can do even better than that. I say all this so you're not afraid to sail in June or July. You might pay a little more, but on some cruise lines, the cost difference between the cheapest sailing date and the most expensive one really isn't all that bad. Take a look at the prices in green for the type of cabin you'd like. I would be choosing those ships to start pricing out my cruise if I were sailing during the peak demand window in June and July. Sure, I'll pay more, but I'd much rather pay $600 more for the balcony cabin than $3,300 more. Another thing I would do, let's say I have my heart set on sailing on a particular ship. We'll use Norwegian Encore as an example. Because there tends to be such a huge range in pricing between the lowest price sailing date and the highest, I check the prices again 90 days out from the sailing. And if they were still out of reach, check once more 60 days out from the sailing. By that point, those cabins will likely be discounted to sell any remaining inventory, and it would still be far enough out for me to find a decent fare for my flight to Seattle's cruise terminal. But sure, I will take a risk that all of the cabins will sell out. Personally, I'm okay with that because why pay $5,000 more for the same cabin? As I said earlier in the video, these prices are from January 15th, so plan on them increasing or decreasing according to each ship's inventory as we get closer to the sailing date. I'm sure this was an eye-opener in terms of just how much pricing can fluctuate over the Alaska sailing season. I'm hoping it was helpful in being able to identify some opportunities for savings for the dates and ships you were considering for your 2025 Alaska adventure. So, what are some takeaways from this video that apply to 2025 sailings? First, there tend to be more opportunities to save money during the first 3 weeks of sailing in Alaska on most ships, but not all. Second, Royal Caribbean does tend to offer better pricing at the beginning and end of the sailing season. Third, Carnival, Celebrity, and Norwegian offer their best cabin rates in the beginning of the season. 4. Cabin pricing may double on some cruise lines starting in mid-June and extending through July, so if you have some flexibility in your travel plans but want to stick with the same ship, you may want to consider pricing out differences with the May, August, or September sailings on that ship. And last, don't assume that it's cheaper to sail on a 4.5-star rated ship than a 5-star rated ship during the same time period. If demand is high, that ship's prices may be artificially inflated, leading you to assume that other ships' prices are the same, when in actuality, they're much less. In my next video, we'll examine pricing for 2026 sailings to see if those variances we saw here hold true if you purchase your cruise at least a year in advance. Thanks for watching today. I hope you can join me again in one of these videos. Until then, here's hoping that your next adventure is just around the corner.